Khrushchev, he said, the earth is an ark, and we can't build another one. We need to preserve it. And the question now is, are we willing to do anything like that today? Or are we going to remain stuck in a self-righteous story in which America is categorically good and our opponents are irredeemably evil? That's the example we've set for everybody in the world. No wonder it's been replicated everywhere, between Israel and Iran, between India and Pakistan, between Shia and Sunni, between Jew and Arab, between Hindu and Muslim, left and right, between pro-life and pro-choice, between vax and anti-vax. This tribalistic, us versus them thinking is tearing us apart. Peace comes from a different place. It starts by seeing within others and within ourselves that which is not selfish, but is brave and generous and idealistic and has good intentions. And I'm not saying that we should ignore the base elements of human nature or the dangers of the world. But if that's all that we see, then we're going to be stuck forever in the mentality of war. And that's where the military-industrial complex wants to keep us. To chart a course for the future of our nation's military and foreign policy, I'll return once again to the words of John F. Kennedy. Too many of us think that peace is impossible.
Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable.
When we take the first step toward peace, we will become once again a true world leader, a moral authority. It doesn't take much, it's just the first step. And people will start looking at America differently, the way they did when my uncle was president. Thank you all very much.
I think a lot of people are confused about why we're not trying to negotiate a settlement, why we're not trying to force peace talks, why that isn't something that we're requiring along with all of these donations and all of the funding and the weaponry. But I think, it's pretty clear to a lot of people that we may not want peace talks.
There's people making a lot of money on this.
That's right.
We committed now 140 billion. If Biden gets the extra 24 billion that he's looking for. But in March we upped it to 113 billion. Well, the entire budget of EPA is 12 billion. So that's all we've got for the environment in this country. But we have 10 times that for Ukraine. And, we're having crisis here.
Yeah, we have millions of people in the U.S. that can't eat, that don't have enough.
That have a lot of problems.
35% of Americans
those resources
are not making enough to pay for basic human needs. And those people are on the edge of becoming homeless. And it's a crisis. The entire budget for CDC is 12 billion. But we got 10 times that again. When Mitch McConnell was asked in March, why are we in the Ukraine? Why do we have enough money for this? Where's the money coming from? He said, don't worry about it, because that money's not really going to Ukraine. It's going to U.S. military contractors, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, Lockheed. And, so he admitted it's just a big money laundering scheme to the military-industrial complex. And then if you look, who do you think actually owns all of those companies?
State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock.
Exactly.
Yes.
So now you see
it all goes back to that.
Yeah, they're just strip mining the wealth from the American middle class and shifting it upward through all of these different mechanisms that they literally control everything.
So, I mean, and no one's talking about this, which is interesting. The Republicans aren't talking about it. The Democrats aren't talking about it. You're the only candidate out there kind of bringing up these issues in this way.
You made a comment after Wednesday's presidential debate on the GOP side that the candidates are out of sync with the public. And I think you referenced Oliver Anthony's song, Richmond, North of Richmond.
Richmond, north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just want to have total control.
He really frames this as a class war. The working poor are being systematically stripped mined of their wealth by what he calls Richmond, north of Richmond. In other words, the Congress that essentially functions as indentured servants to the big corporations. Anthony has talked about, how we've got to put aside the culture war, because that's kind of an orchestrated dispute, that keeps blacks and whites fighting each other. It's a distraction from the real culprits of this, which is BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, these huge corporations that now own 88% of the S&P 500. And they're now trying to buy every single-family home in America. And if they stay on the current trajectory, they will own 60% of the single-family homes by 2030. Almost everybody I know has a story of a friend or their own story of going to buy a home, about to make an offer on it, or maybe they made an offer on it, and then somebody swoops in with a cash offer and takes it off the table, steals it out from under them. And when you look at who that is, it's usually an LLC with some ambiguous name. But if you trace it to actually who owns it, it's BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. So these companies are buying our land base, they're buying up the farms in this country. Today, the average wage for an American is $5,000 less than the cost of basic human needs of food, transportation, and housing. And so credit card debt has gone up. And who owns virtually all of those banks and credit card companies? BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. So the whole thing is rigged to strip mine wealth from the American public. And these Republicans who are debating this week, they're like 40 years behind. They have all these platitudes from the Reagan administration. We're going to be tough on crime, tough on China, tough on Russia, tough on women who, want bodily autonomy, tough on the environment. But none of them talked about what's happening to Americans who just can't pay their bills anymore. If you like this video and you want to help me become president of the United States, go to Kennedy24.com and donate now.
Hello, my name is Madhav Vassetti. I have been a physician for 25 years. I've trained at some of the best institutions in this country. And this is an appeal to all my colleagues in medicine to consider voting for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in 2024. Many of us have been very quick to label him a so-called anti-vaxxer. He isn't. His mission has been the same as ours, to make sure that all medical interventions, including vaccines, have met the highest standards for safety. Bobby believes that our regulatory agencies have failed us in this regard, and he is asking us to show him where he has gotten it wrong. I tried to, and I couldn't. His position on vaccines is unpopular in our community. It is this sentiment that is being leveraged by media and others to justify the censorship of his position on all matters. Censorship should be anathema to every member of a free society, and especially to those of us in the scientific community. I urge you to please hear him out before passing judgment. Thank
you. A loud report that I recognized as coming from a high-powered rifle, and I immediately looked over my shoulder to the right where the sound had come from, and I couldn't see anything right away. And I turned quickly and looked at the president, and President Kennedy was kind of leaning a little bit to his left towards Mrs. Kennedy.
One of the last remaining witnesses of the JFK assassination says he is rethinking the entire incident that was going on for the first time. Former Secret Service agent who was protecting Kennedy that day told the New York Times that, quote, "I'm beginning to doubt myself. Now I begin to wonder about what really happened." Now, of course, this comes as JFK's nephew, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is now seeking the Democratic nomination for the presidency, but the so-called Democrats are not acting very democratic. So if RFK Jr. feels like he is not getting a fair shake from the Democrats, will he run third party? He joins us now with more. Let me first ask you about the Secret Service agent. The guy's name is Paul Landis. You know, he talked about the magic bullet. Magic bullet to me was absurd from day one. To me, it never had any credibility. He was there, even put himself on record at the time, and mentioned that he made a mistake in his placement of the bullet in that room where your uncle was after he was shot. My question to you is, should this now open a full-fledged investigation?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this development is not really his revelation, because this information has been out there, and the information, the overwhelming information that there was more than one shooter involved and that there were multiple people involved has been recognized by the American people. 70% of Americans don't believe the Warren report, but more importantly, when Congress reinvestigated the Warren Commission evidence and was looking at much more evidence in 1979, the House Select Assassinations Committee, they came to the conclusion, and this was the official conclusion of the report, that John Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. Majority of that House staff believed that it was the CIA behind that conspiracy. The important thing that's happened now is finally the New York Times, the orthodoxy is starting to crumble. The New York Times, which has been the major bastion, the champion of the Warren Committee report long after it was discredited by a million different sources. The other thing that's important now, Sean, is, I think that they ought to have a real investigation of what happened, a genuine investigation. That looks at all the evidence, the millions of pages of documents that are now available. But more importantly, the last 5,000 pages of documents that the CIA will not release. It's breaking the law now. They're supposed to release those documents by 2017. President Trump promised to release them, which was his duty, and then he didn't. We don't know why. President Biden promised to release them, and then he didn't. We don't know why. Among those documents, the most interesting things that people want to know about is Bill Harvey's, the Miami station chief, who almost certainly was directly involved in the assassination, his travel records on that day. And I think most of the scholars who are looking at this issue, that is the principal piece of interest that they want to know about, that we believe that the CIA is.
A security problem at a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. event tonight. An armed man impersonating a U.S. Marshal showed up at this event at the Wilshire Ebell Theater. Kennedy's security noticed something suspicious about him and detained him before they called police. The man was arrested. Kennedy says he was wearing 2 shoulder holsters with loaded pistols and had spare ammunition magazines. The FBI has been notified Kennedy is running for president.
We were in a great discussion about the Ukraine war because we spent $8 trillion on wars. We've spent all of these interventions that we had after 9/11, where all of these, the architects of them, these neoconservatives, after that, they were shut out of government, right? They kind of left, they were disgraced. And now they're popping up again. They're popping up again as Democrats, and they're the main, a lot of them are some of the main promoters of the idea of this endless war in the Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things my uncle figured out when he, 4 months into his administration, he had been warned by Eisenhower about the emergence of the military-industrial complex, which would turn America into an imperial state abroad and a surveillance state, a garrison state, a security state at home. And, Eisenhower had said the thing that our founding fathers had said: you cannot maintain democracy if you're an imperial state abroad. You're going to, you'll bankrupt the middle class. You'll turn us into a surveillance state. My uncle, 4 months in, recognized that, when he was lied to by the CIA, by Allen Dulles, Charles Cabell, Richard Bissell, and by the military brass about the Bay of Pigs. And when the men were dying on the beach, you know, he took public blame for it. But he privately told his aides, I want to take the CIA, shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And then he fired Alan Dulles, Richard Bissell, and Charles Cabell, the guys who were directly responsible for lying to him. But for the next 1,000 days of his administration, he was in a pitched battle to keep our country out of war. They wanted the wars because he recognized that their job had devolved into providing the military-industrial complex, military contractors, a constant pipeline of new wars to feed their profits. Well, in, you know, the neocons, which are neoconservatives for people who don't know, it's a movement that started in the early 1990s, around 92, when the Berlin Wall came down, and they published a document that called the Project for a New American Century that said that because we were the victor in the Cold War, that America now had the right to rule the world for a century or more by using its superior military powers, the unipower. So after 2001, we spent, between then and now, we've spent $8 trillion on wars, on regime change wars. It was the Iraq War and then all these spillover wars in Yemen, Libya, Syria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, et cetera. What did we get for those wars? Here's what we got. Iraq is now worse off than we found it. It's an incoherent kind of battle between Shia and Sunni death squads. We killed more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein. We killed between 650,000 and 1 million Iraqis. We have pushed Iraq into a proxy posture with Iran, which is exactly the foreign policy outcome we've been trying to avoid for decades. In the spillover war in Syria, we created ISIS. We sent 2 million refugees into Europe and destabilized every democracy in Europe. You know, we created Brexit.
Right.
The riots that are now happening in France are a direct result of those wars. And we bankrupted the American middle class because we didn't have the money to pay for them. So, and that is, you know, what we got. Well, that's one of the things they're talking about. The DNC does not want me in the primary. They, you know, they have the candidate that they want, who is President Biden. They don't want him to debate. They don't want him to do retail politics. They don't want him to have unscripted conversations with voters, and they definitely don't want him to debate me. And so they look at me, I feel, although I haven't spoken to them directly, I've written them, but have not gotten reply, as a colossal nuisance. And they're doing everything they can to fix the results. So one of the things they've done is they've made it so that any vote that I get in Iowa or New Hampshire will count for Biden. And they're trying to do the same thing now in Georgia. How
are they doing that?
Well, they're passing a rule that if any candidate who steps into the state of New Hampshire or Iowa to campaign will lose all their delegates. And so I've campaigned in both states, so I will lose their delegates. But now what they're trying to do is we're going to know on September 14th whether they actually do it, is they're trying to pass another rule that if you step foot in New Hampshire or Iowa, that any vote you get in Georgia, which is a big delegate state, will also count for the president and not for, you know, so they're basically disenfranchising everybody in those states. So there's no campaign. And they're talking about this idea of making myself and Marianne Williamson, who's the other Democratic candidate, to pay for all the primaries ourselves.
Are you enjoying this process, Cheryl, of running for president? And just,
well, after that, doesn't that sound fun?
I mean, it sounds fun. I mean, is this fun for you? You're an accomplished actress and comedian, and like, you know, is this fun going all over the place and meeting people? I'm sure it has its challenges, but is it enjoyable at all?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I did not think that it would be fun.
Of
I'm
course.
just being honest. It's
Of
not
course.
my vibe. I don't like
No-
crowds. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. But
And she doesn't like hostile,
Of course.
She's a comedian.
Right.
Well, yeah.
She makes
yeah.
people happy. She makes
Right.
people laugh.
Yeah. But it was interesting because I met Bobby in South Carolina, and I thought I would just, sit in the hotel room and wait till he got home.
Yeah.
But then I went out with him everywhere, and it was so interesting because I don't know when in my life I would be going to like small communities in
Right.
South Carolina and just meeting people, just listening to people. And it's very sweet actually, and it's very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people live in your space, your
Right.
town, your city, wherever, and so you get wrapped up in what's going on in your city, and what's going on in Los Angeles is not necessarily a reflection of what's going on
Right.
in Middle America. So
Right.
it's so really interesting to sit down and talk to people and hear what they're going through and what their struggles are and what their hopes are. It's a really sort of magical way to see America.
Connect with people.
just keeps rolling up. Kennedy, he just keeps rolling up. Kennedy, he just keeps rolling along. Up for Kennedy.
Hello, I'm Mark Frisconi, and welcome to Set Chat Live. This is a weekly live stream where we discuss the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is running to be President of the United States in 2024. The following conversations are the best of our daily discussions, which were held in our Discord server over the past week. If you would like to be on our live panel, please join our Discord server today. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., son of former U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy and nephew of former President John F. Kennedy, is running with a focus on honest government, civil liberties, and peace and economic revitalization. In his announcement, he said, during this campaign and during my administration, my objective will be to make as many Americans as possible forget that they are Republicans or Democrats and remember that they are Americans. Strongly committed to civil liberties, Kennedy emphasizes the importance of an uncaptured government that fosters and protects freedom of speech. So we are
Are you still there, Mark?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Hang on.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. It's good to see everybody. We've got a little bit pared down crew today because the people from the Michigan State Office, Andrew and Will, are teaming together with people from Indiana who are active there to go to the Farm Aid concert today. And hopefully they'll be checking in with us a little bit later. But there's a huge Farm Aid concert with Willie Nelson and a bunch of other big country star names to raise money. And they're going to be representing the campaign. They're passing out literature and spreading the love for Bobby Kennedy. Today we're joined with Rochelle and Vladislav, who you saw in the opening video, or if not, watch the video afterwards. And our topics today are going to cover some of the volunteer events that have gone on in the past week, some in-depth look at, what is the cost of war? What are we getting out of these forever wars? And some of Kennedy's thoughts on this and some articles that he shared about that so that we can discuss it a little bit. And then lastly, some new initiatives that he has for the campaign to help us all participate and volunteer as we can all the time. So, okay, what's our first story, Mark?
I'm working on sharing the tab as we speak. Let's get this up.
Okay, there we go.
There we go. We from beginning here.
Can you put us in? There we go.
There we go. Okay, a couple of technical issues. All right. So first thing we've got is continuation. We had the day of service that came up last week. There was a lot of events. I held one. It turned out great. The Team Kennedy did a good job of getting folks to show up. Here's a video that Mr. Kennedy made, and we'll take a look at this.
Sound?
Oh, the sound wasn't coming through?
No.
All right, let me try that again. That was a entire screen. I have to share the screen. There we go. All right, let me try that over. Can you hear it?
No. Not hearing it.
Okay. All right. So the first issue here is I have this downloaded to my desktop, and so now we're not able to share the sound. Let me stop this sharing.
Okay. Well, why don't we talk for a minute while we're doing that? This is, there was a lot of discussion about security and things with the. Are we getting it? Oh no,
well,
no, we're getting lots of me. Echo.
Oh, are you echo? So I've got the. Let's see. Let's get her back to the beginning. Can you let me try this again? See if you can hear it.
roasted. Oh, sorry. This is what people used to do before Roundup. My Uncle John F. Kennedy urged Americans to ask not what their country could do for them, but to ask instead what they could do for their country. On September 11th, I'm asking all of those who support my campaign to do their best to participate in a national day of service. I want to start using the momentum of this campaign right now to improve people's lives.
Can we have... Okay.
There we go. All right. Squeeze in together. Get in there. There we go. Yeah.
We all need to think of ways that we can reorient ourselves and start using our talents to repair the world and to heal the big divisions that are separating us.
I love. Oh, now we're getting an echo. Anybody else hearing the echo?
No, I think you were getting it on your.
I can hear Carly.
I'm getting echoes on everybody.
All right. So if we're not talking, let's go on mute then.
Okay. It's echoing when I'm talking as well.
It's David Mark.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead with this because this was the day of service issue. It was really, it was kind of a lot of fun. We had one. I had a trash pickup. A lot of folks showed up for it, and it's a good way to kind of start out our discussion today. We have the next thing coming up is the Clapton fundraiser, and we showed a little clip of that on the lead-in. Let's take a look at. Do we have a video for that?
The video is the second one.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Okay. So, Mark, none of us can talk. We're getting echoes. So I'm not sure how to solve it. Okay, it's only me.
Is it better when I end the screen share? No. Or are you still getting it?
Okay. And now that is that. Let me say something here. No, I'm fine now.
How about you, Rochelle? Is everything fine with you?
Yep. Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay, so I think there was a problem with you, Carly, with the screen share was causing some feedback on your computer because I wasn't hearing it. I don't know. Was anybody else hearing an echo?
I was hearing Carly echo.
Do you have a monitor turned on? Okay, we really need to press ahead though.
So,
all right. So what we got here, what we were showing, and I'll try to share again. Let's see if we can share. Let's try to share differently. I'm trying to share screen. Well, screen or window. Let's do the window. I have to share the audio and the screen. Okay, I got to share screen 2. Turn on screen share. Okay, so what we have here is a picture of the fundraiser. Mr. Kennedy's been home all week, or not home all week, but they went back to the West Coast to take a few days of downtime to rest and relax. And at the end of it, here it looks like they had a nice concert. Mr. Clapton showed up, raised $2.2 million. We have some other notable people there, Stephen Stills, as well as Mr. Kennedy and his lovely wife, and of course Eric Clapton, and then there's Tulsi Gabbard with him, and then we've got a little clip of some of the music. I'm a big fan of Eric. I have been my whole life, so I love listening to this. Let's take a listen. So a little bit of that. That's kind of fun. Carly, did you sort things out yet?
It's I haven't touched anything on my end.
It's better?
No.
Okay. Well, we can't hear. I can't hear an echo. So if you can live through it, we can continue.
It's echoing when I'm talking here, and so I don't know what's going on. I'll have to just be quiet.
Well, you sound fine to us. So if you can kind of power through it, we can.
It's very hard to talk.
Okay.
With a 5-second delay.
So the next thing we've got is a video from Mr. Kennedy, Peace for Our Time. And so we're kind of hopping off into some a little bit more meatier topics. And let's take a look at this video. Oop, I'm sorry.
Is it any wonder that as America has waged violence throughout the world, violence has overtaken us in our own nation? It has not come as an invasion. It has come from within. Our bombs, our drones, our armies are incapable of stopping the gun violence on our streets and schools or domestic violence in our homes. I see the same link here as my father and Martin Luther King saw about the Vietnam War. They believed that we could not have warfare abroad without bringing that violence home to our attitudes, to our communities.
I know that he has, in his spirit, he has a faith in peace. I've sensed that, or I've seen that.
I'm voting for you, Mr. Kennedy! Mr. Kennedy!
He understands the profound necessity to change our policy.
Thank you. Waging endless wars abroad, we have neglected the foundation of our own well-being. We have a decaying economic infrastructure. We have a demoralized people and despairing people. We have toxins in our air and our soil and our water. We have deteriorating mental and physical health. These are the wages of war. What will be? What will be the wages of peace?
The United States, as the world knows, will never start a war. We do not want a war. We do not now expect a war. This generation of Americans has already had enough, more than enough, of war and hate and oppression. We shall be prepared if others wish it. We shall be alert to try to stop it. But we shall also do our part to build a world of peace where the weak are safe and the strong are just.
Let's take up that call from 60 years ago and ask Americans, all of us, to re-examine our attitude. We have been immersed in a foreign policy discourse that is all about adversaries and threats and allies and enemies and domination. We've become addicted to comic book good versus evil narratives that erase complexity and blind us to the legitimate motives and the legitimate cultural and economic concerns and the legitimate security concerns of other peoples and other nations. We have internalized and institutionalized a reflex of violence as the response for any and all crises. Everything becomes a war. War on drugs, the war on terror, the war on cancer, war on climate change. This way of thinking predisposes us to wage endless wars abroad, wars and coups and bombs and drones and regime change operations and support for paramilitaries and juntas and dictators. None of this has made us safer, and none of it has burnished our leadership or our moral authority. But more importantly, we must ask ourselves, is this really who we are? Is this what we want to be? Is that what Americans' founders envisioned?
All right, Carly, I hope you've been able to maybe stop the share. Maybe that helps. And then we could start in. That was a very powerful piece Kennedy campaign came out with this week. Hopefully, Rochelle, maybe you can jump in on the conversation too. We're missing Carly, our best conversationalist here. Are you back? Oh, you're muted. Good. So we watched this earlier this week, and we wanted to carry this forward into the SAT chat, which we're having some technical problems with this morning, as usual. But we talk about, Kennedy talks about a lot of themes there that really strike a chord, and it did with me. We spend all this money for defense abroad, and yet we are unable to defend ourselves within. And then one of the things that he talks about that really I think resonates with me is that we cannot be an imperium abroad and then be a nation who stands for peace at home. We have all these issues, these domestic violence issues. People are at each other's throats. It's something that we talk about part of this campaign. Here we are to heal the divide. To stop that, we can't be arming the world at the tune of, 1.1 trillion or more, I think is what's been quoted. Are you there, Carly? I can hear you. Yeah.
You haven't heard me when I've talked. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So, okay, I'm good unless the video's on. So
yeah, we'll just share that sparingly then.
Okay, so I have not been watching. I've been messing with hardware here.
Well, so this was that first video, that one that was so powerful about peace for all time. It was clips from the opening, speech in Boston when he announced his presidency, and there were so many great clips in there, and some of the things that struck me, because Kennedy really is the truth teller, right? Why are we having so much trouble getting the message out? Because the message is so on point. With the forces that control our country. Our economy is based on war. And so he is like the Alex. And I'm gonna kind of steal a quote I came across and read it. Ozzy New York, I'm gonna give him the shout out on this. He kind of did a little write-up about why Mr. Kennedy's having such a hard time getting traction. Is that he's the Alexander Solzhenitsyn of America. He is exposing our soul, that inconvenient lie that is underneath us, that we all accept, that people go to brunch and they accept that it's okay to go bomb, innocent people abroad, and that's perfectly all right. And so he exposes that, and we have to, and it's inconvenient and it's uncomfortable. I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I've seen a lot of problems, where people, like I've always objected to, why is it okay to do this stuff? And I always, most people are like, yeah, whatever. And because it's not affecting them right now. There are people, real people who are affected each and every bomb we drop. And, why are we doing wars and not negotiating? Why are all these things going on? And yet individual people, it's like, what can I do to stop it? And it's like, yeah, I can talk to people, but what does that do? And people don't recognize the power in talking to each other. Because each conversation you have, whoever's talking gets a little more assurance to have the conversation themselves. Whatever their version of it is. It doesn't have to be exactly what I was thinking. And the more people talk, it changes the entire climate. You can call it like the vibe of things, but I'm not talking in a new agey sort of way. It's just the collective mood starts to shift. And once that shifts, then the politicians can't, have to react to it. And that's one power. And, it's sort of like the, fluttering of butterfly wings can change things and all that. But, it's lots of little things do add up, because I can't go stop a bomber from taking off, or there's a lot of big things I can't do that feel like you're really making a difference. And the people who go make these big valiant stands, often nothing happens because of it, but it's the collective mood and responding to things in social media right now. Obviously it's a big threat, or they would not be censoring as many people. That's some insight to how powerful it is. Just letting your likes and responding to people in social media, because they would leave it be if it wasn't a threat, if it wasn't effective, and they wouldn't be paying lots of people to go do it. Okay, I think I've made up for all the time I didn't talk now.
Well, good. Yeah, we're glad to hear from you. I'm sorry, every week it's something new we got to figure out, different. But that's, we're just this is a plane that's definitely being built, that's it's being flown. So apologies for any, but there's only 3 people listening to us when we started, so we'll get through that. The other thing, though, I wanted to talk about more seriously about this piece was the reflexive violence comment that Mr. Kennedy made. That that's something that I think needs to be changed, and I think there was a woman in there. I assume may have been a Buddhist talking about matters of peace. Why is that not an option for us anymore? Why? Because I'm a gamer. I love playing video games. I have for a long time. I like movies. They're fun to watch. But every single time, it is the choice of how the thing, whatever the protagonist has to resolve, he uses violence, and that seems to be the first choice that we turn to in our society. Why is that? Is that? I mean, can we just kind of appeal to our higher selves and change that? And I think Mr. Kennedy says, shows us that we can.
Well, you look at the lessons you teach to kids. You don't say to a couple of 3-year-olds, well, go punch him then. Get it back.
Right.
It's always use your words.
Well,
can you explain what it is you need so the other one can understand and respond accordingly? And this is a big deal through elementary school, and then people get okay about it, but they still revert to it when you don't see people in offices when they're having a big disagreement going out in the hall and slugging it out. And you expect people to figure out other ways to do it. We are capable of it. And I don't know why our leadership is not capable of it. Because I do think there are ways, and we've seen things, negotiated pieces many times.
Now, I did share this without sharing sound. Is this better? Can you?
Yeah, this is fine. This is still good.
So when I share my other screen with sound, that causes issues. So I'll just give you a fair warning when we go to a tab that there is going to be sound on. But so moving on to the next because we got way too much to talk about this week, and so let's move on to the next topic. And Rochelle, are you still with us? I wanted to just do a quick check.
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay, good. So the next thing was a tweet that came out from the Kennedy campaign about the Ukraine war. To prepare for this, Mr. Kennedy says, "Hey, Americans, want the Ukraine war to go on year after year? Well, that's what NATO Chief Stoltenberg predicts. Time to elect a president who will end the war and bring the money home." Mr. Kennedy is retweeting a Political article. NATO chief warns Ukraine allies to prepare for a long war. Ukrainian military continued its counteroffensive with drone attacks targeting Crimea and Moscow. And so this was a kind of a little bit in that theme of foreign issues that we're going to be talking about now. And so this tweet came out. Do we want that? I mean, I don't think most Americans do they?
Well, the idea of, well, gee, let's just fight it out. And it's like, well, what's this like for people in Ukraine? They're like, yeah, keep dropping those bombs on me. We're loving it. It's like they're stuck in the middle of something which they didn't ask for. And it's, anybody here like to speak on that at all?
No, this just makes me wonder, when we enter conflicts all the time without officially declaring war, but how many years of peace have we had as a country with no conflicts?
Oh, you said that number handy. It's not many. Like 20 or 25 years throughout our entire history, we've been, completely at peace of any sort. And so we've been a very warlike nation right from the beginning. And there were times where maybe it was more called for, but it doesn't mean we have to. In today's world, I guess to me, it makes really very little sense because from a practical standpoint, no one's going to invade you anymore. Not America. And so there are different types of things that we need to be prepared for. And, to have all these, these hundreds, how many 200 or more military bases overseas is forward. and then everything's a war. That's what he talked about in that last video. So it's a war on terror. It's a war on drugs. It's a continual
if you call
war
it a war,
mentality.
the president has more powers, and that's why they call it a war.
Yeah, and the Congress has been very they've abdicated their authority entirely to the president by not, monitoring matters. They have the purse strength, but they just continue to give more and more and more money. Each year is another record NDNA approved by Congress and across the aisle. I mean, and then the other thing to think about too is, so we've got a pending shutdown coming up. I understand they've worked out a deal where Ukraine will continue to be funded, even though our government and all the services that might shut down as a result of it will not. So that's our priorities. All right.
So before you go on, Vlad, do you think you'd be able to summarize something? Are you up for talking?
Yes, I can. May I? Yes.
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. This is topic about endless wars. And first of all, I want to say thank you, the Kennedy Volunteers team, for providing a platform for my speech. I want to go in the essence of these endless wars. And I want to start from the quote of one famous American. Freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved, and tyranny is erected on its ruins. Republics derive their strength and vigor from a popular examination into the action of the magistrates. This is Benjamin Franklin. Chronic capitalism. What?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Chronic capitalism created a world of total censorship, and it is need to be brave to live free and speak free. And we live in this world of potential thieves and murderers where is no justice. Nation clash heads whites with blacks. Inequality is cultivated and history is destroyed. Constant substitutions of concept occurs. And Mark, you told about the video games and that you're a gamer. You know probably that the most popular game in the world is about murder, about theft. It's GTA 5. This is the most popular multimedia project in history. And the most popular films now are about murders and thefts. Films do not promote natural human values and replace all concepts of freedom. Freedom remains only in words, in the fictional world of comics and other things with superheroes and unrealistic heroes. Behind all of this, there are certain invisible entities that, according to papers, are not monopolies, but the names that sound something like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, behind which are big families with their royal statues, old money, new money. The essence is the same. Constant growth of profits, the expense of our lives. Big Pharma is enriched due to the chronic disease. Big Tech is enriched due to the fact that young people and adults also serve technology and smartphones. And therefore, osteopaths have more and more clients. And now the big military complex, together with the oil complex, fossil fuel complex, is enriching itself through the military operation in Ukraine. On the territory of the richest country in Europe after Russia, of course. Where capital flows, I mean capital is social relations. Capital always collides, and it collides where there are a lot of resources. This is how endless wars for profit are born. If we talk not about chronic capitalism, just about capitalism, capitalism is in some way it's okay. It's aroused in people that desire for innovation and initiative. Once people overthrow the monarchy in advanced countries. For example, in the United States, the American people found their freedom from shackles of feudalism. And it was in the United States the system of syndicates and trust as association of hyper collectives was born to the highest stage, to the highest degree. Rockefellers, Astors, DuPonts, and even the Rothschild are widely represented on the world stage of the capital and transnational corporations. And for myself, to such characters as, for example, Larry Fink, the owner of the largest corporation in the world called BlackRock. Maybe there is some connection with Rockefellers, BlackRock, rock and roll, I don't know. And even to political characters as Henry Kissinger, Old Europe Money, Wallenberg, and Lynn Forrester, the Rothschilds, and others, I personally want to say thank you. You are the best teachers who teach us the language of elite and the language of the poor. The gap that occurred in chronic capitalism has brought our planet to a critical point. And we all understand this. Endless wars, endless disposable goods, and disposable relationships are taking us further and further from our roots, from family values, from our home planet Earth. Because, as the classics teach, you need to support those who are a little closer to justice. At the same time, do not forget to criticize and guide them in order to avoid a break in continuity. Therefore, I consider President candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. is the best and the most promising at this moment. He has a unique position. His family is very ancient aristocrat Irish family. His ancestor was a representative of the new money, the new millionaires in the United States. His family is partly old money due to the family union with Jacqueline. What can I tell? And one else I see based on his biography is that he is involved in the life of ordinary workers, of ordinary people in the middle class. He is not cut off from the society, and at the same time, he is close to the nature, like a real snake catcher.
So
I will tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just 10 seconds, okay?
Okay.
And all. Time will tell where he can apply his skills to the presidential post. At the moment, he has a truly revolutionary idea and campaign against chronic capitalism, against endless wars, for real freedom in deeds, not in words, for real choice and the restoration of democracy. Thank you for your attention.
Hey, Vlad.
So that was awesome. I mean, it's interesting for me to hear first, what does this look like from outside the U.S. And secondly, you've got you're going both so broadly on that and down to exactly why Kennedy's such a good candidate, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions all the time, folks from overseas who are very interested in our candidate because of his stance on peace, and I enjoy it. So it's great to hear he's going to be very well liked overseas, just like his uncle was. I think Mr. Kennedy's mentioned on a number of occasions that there are more bridges, hospitals, works of public works named after the Kennedy family than any other president in history, just because of their investment. And that's what he's talking about doing now. He wants to do the investment rather than, go to war again with another war with the Chinese. Let's compete with them economically and, build our country up in the process. And so
I like that part of let's turn it into a competition.
Yeah.
And
let's
see whose idea plays out best rather than trying to force people to do things they don't want to do.
Well, in the end, both of us would be better for it, as economic competitors. We both move towards a better place. So that makes perfect sense. But now, we got Nancy Pelosi flying in, trying to get shot out of the sky so we can go to another war.
Where is she flying?
Well, that was back a while back, you know.
Oh, this is her trip to Taiwan.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump over. Too much to talk about. Another tweet that came out was the darker workings of American policy. Again, this is again on the theme. Like, so we were in Afghanistan for 20 years. What happened? Well, there was a lot of poppy production going on, and so all of a sudden, after we leave, that kind of drops off real quickly. So let's take a look at a couple of the clips that Mr. Kennedy shared in a tweet.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, before we go there, this were the best parts of the article, and I don't need to read it all, but basically, poppy production went crazy when we were over there. At the same time, we happened to have an opioid crisis, and which they then locked down and told everybody don't take it anymore just before we left Afghanistan. And what's happened, first off, the Taliban has eradicated most of the poppy production in a year since we left, even though it was gone rampant for 20 years while we were there. And then what's happened now is people still want painkillers. And a lot of people are addicted to this stuff, which is where the fentanyl crisis has come from, because fentanyl is a synthetic form of heroin. And I was not clear on all this. I just knew suddenly we're talking about fentanyl all the time, and I didn't understand where it had come from. So this article, if you get a chance to check it out, hopefully I put the link to it in there. If not, contact us, because this came from a Kennedy link. So, okay, so that's what was the best of what was on this page.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm going to pick anything out of there, but
I pretty much, and then this is the map that shows the difference on the left. Everything that's pink was poppies growing in Afghanistan. And even those green areas had a lot of pink in them, as that close-up shows. But then on the right there, this is now a year later. And even if you go in close on those greens, there's hardly any poppy production. And so, and they've switched it to growing wheat or orchards, so food content as opposed to drugs. So, is this what we are actually doing in these countries, or this, whether that was our purpose or not, that is what happened.
So
we're not doing the world a favor by going in and occupying these places.
Yeah, and so the question, we had a conversation in our Discord group, which folks listening should totally join, discord.gg/Team Kennedy. We have these conversations every day. That's what lead up to these sat chats. But we had this conversation, and one of the things that kind of popped up, we go a lot of directions with them. Well, one of the things that popped up was this is actually a kind of a Breaking Bad theme, where the corporation was buying this raw heroin from a source at a greatly discounted price over what it would cost them to produce it here in the United States, and then they were able to remanufacture it, because heroin is, in the end, is heroin. So I mean, there's no proof that anything like that was taking place, but boy, we sure had a lot of corporate people over there really interested in what was going on and making lots of money, and poppy production was just going through the roof. And we had how many soldiers in country at the time? A lot. So that was an interesting point. Anyway, so our foreign policy isn't always what it seems. I think Mr. Kennedy's pointed that out a few times.
So often that we're told a story which has very little bearing on what another group of people are doing and believing with things. And I think that's the part, where he talks about how about we just tell the American people truth, I think is so strong, because you see things about like a fighter plane. We lost it in South Carolina or North Carolina. It was one of the Carolinas. And the question is, how does that happen if we're giving you all these monies? Or is there something else going on and you're just not telling us? And at this point, everybody I've talked to, it's just like, well, who knows what the real story is? Because you can't believe what's coming from the news anymore, because too many of these cover stories have been revealed. So, we really need to start, and they've just passed a bunch of new legislation in the UK, which I forget their exact words on it, but it's like, there's legitimate news but they're really at war now with anybody but their approved stations or approved sources, and backed by law now, which is really a scary direction that things are going. So censorship is getting worse, not better.
That's right. All right. So next up, I've got the Aubrey Marcus endorsement. We were kind of talking. We got Vlad's endorsement a little while ago. We got another one coming up here, and I'm getting ready to share some audio. So I'm just giving you fair warning, Carly. I'm going to share an audio tab here. All right, and then I'll just kind of introduce the piece and then play it, and then you can hop back in. So a piece came out. It was actually reshared by the campaign. They aren't going to stop us. The censorship, the coordinated attacks, it all just shows how scared and desperate they are. And they are just people like you and I who think that they're doing the best thing. We fight for them too, even as they fight against us. That's the part of the unifying message from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And one of the reasons I stand with him now and forever. And let's play this. This is quite a great piece.
Wake up, world. You've had a nightmare. The ambulance chasing somnambulism, sleepwalking through minefields of propagandized fear.
Extremely dangerous to our democracy.
A pharmaceutical daze in a pornographic, algorithmic, polarizing haze. Heralding the blasphemy. The end is near. There is no God. Love doesn't work. I'm ashamed of my fuck. The game is rigged and we're stuck. Blink. Open. A new dawn is rising. The truth is returning. The God flame is burning. Culture is churning. Tides of empire turning. And the kingdom is here. This is your moment. Own it. Disown the bad dreams of fomenting puppets on big money strings, parroting the things of who pay them to sing. This is it. Claim your birthright to spark Christic light in the chalice of Eros, a Rosicrucian crucifixion on a cross made of love, arousing feminine waters to douse the dictators, digital and criminal, and lead all of our planet through the long, dark night. Wake up, world. You're asleep in mother's bed, and the house is on fire. Sound the alarm. Ring Revere's bell. Gather the warriors large and the small. Dare to have hope. Elope with the possibility that the proclivity to habituated hate is not our natural state, but has been manipulated, enculturated by forces who forgot what source is. Let it start with a vote, a promissory note, shifting gear out of park to spark the revolution in the cosmo-erotic engine of Noah's orbiting ark. Hark, the return of the king, the bane of war's ring, the stinger of truth in the mendacious flesh of big brother's technocratic nest, a glyphosate ingrate, intransigent, independent, protesting the colonizing of our body of state with guns, germs, and steel, lies, fear, and needle, flying his falcons to remind the eagle the meaning of liberty. This is not just about Robert F. Kennedy. He's but the sword in the hands of the brave, in the land of the free.
All right.
That's so poetic, the way he presents it, and yet it carries a lot of the same core ideas that we heard in Vlad's, long talk there of just, what one was talking through the facts of it and the other through the emotions of it. And, we really, this touches so many different places, and so much of what I see from Mr. Kennedy is less, we're going to do this, this, and this, than just how are we approaching our relationship with each other in the world. And that makes such a big difference in it of just, do you want to annihilate your enemy, or do you want a continuing relationship I saw this, like Jordan Peterson talks about this in terms of relationships with people, that it's been shown in studies that if you people have a one-time interaction with somebody, we've got $10, we can split it, or I can keep the $10 and you get nothing. If you're never going to see the person again, people tend to go for I'll take the $10. But if it's somebody you're going to have to interact with again, and particularly again and again, those people you will split the money with, because it's not just this interaction, it's everyone that goes after it. And I see Kennedy going at we're in this world together, we're going to have to interact with each other, so let's act in that mode, where another group of people, the military-industrial complex, and a lot of these seem to be going with I got to hit my bottom line numbers this year, so I don't care what happens afterwards.
This kind of listening to this made me remember when we were all locked down during COVID, and we were kind of like forced off our hamster wheels, people who were laid off. And I was thinking, I had two, it's terrible of a time as it was. I was like, well, maybe we have time to reflect, maybe this gives everyone the time to reflect and decide, what do we want? How do we want to shape things when we quote, build back better? And secondly, I thought, there's probably going to be a lot of great real science that comes out of this, real studies. It's such an opportunity, for that. And I wonder, there's different, I don't know, different people in power went different ways with it, I will say.
Cool.
And the question is, which of these studies would be funded, and would they be the ones that we'd want to see the results of? Because right now, those funding are not a wide mainstream.
Yeah, all I'm saying is there was the potential, and there still is.
Definitely.
It certainly have changed us, and we'll be studying that for some time to come, I know. A couple of things that struck me about this endorsement, the Aubrey Marcus. I have to admit, I didn't really know who he was until I heard this, and so I had to learn about him. Very talented person. A couple of things was the amount of spiritual imagery that he had in it, and that's something that I think that's the reason why we brought this forward, was that it's a discussion that I like to have, just because I sense it. There is this kind of sense of spiritual energy that kind of follows Mr. Kennedy and his campaign. I mean, Vlad was talking about a few minutes ago about this, historic, his historic place. I believe, in a sense, I see, archetypes being replayed from time to time, and Kennedy's certainly a powerful one of those. But we look at Aubrey's piece. He talks about the long dark night of the soul, of course, St. Thomas reference, and then the return of the king, and then he mentions the crucifix and the Rosicrucians, and so there's a lot of that, and so I wanted to kind of kick that up, because I've seen that. I've been an organizer since I heard Kennedy first announced. I just said I need to go help, and I've been meeting people, and they're motivated in this regard in a way I've never really encountered before. And so I don't know if you guys are comfortable talking about this, but it's something, I'm here for it. It kind of woke me up a little bit, some of his, statements about what he wants to do. Something about it, it stirs you in a way that politicians normally don't.
Well, I've done a lot of studying about the different ways our brain thinks. And we're being pushed into what is considered a left brain of, bottom line, let's just do it. Here's the one path to get to where you want to be. And basically it has people operating like computers do. But according to people like Dr. Ian McGilchrist, that is the weaker side of our brain. It's great for doing things, but all of our strength is when we use the whole brain, which is you start with the right, you start with the big picture, you start with the feelings and connecting to experiences and relationships. And when you're operating from there, suddenly, this is what really being human is. It's not just operating like a computer. And we're being pushed, and we didn't realize we were being pushed over into this, something that could be easily replaced by AI, because computers do certain things better than we do. But it's like an awakening to this whole other part of ourselves. And that part does connect to the spiritual. It connects to, and whether the spiritual is of nature and the stars and that sort of thing, whether it's to whatever religious upbringing you have, and that part that is beyond the organized religion, but what you actually feel when you're in a large cathedral listening to a pipe organ, that sort of stuff. And I think that's what he's touching with people. And it's kind of a surprise because we didn't realize we'd been cut off from it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, and this kind of leads into this other conversation that we've had about the vibrational levels. I know it's kind of the new agey sound, but there's a different level. Like, I'm a big fan of Jimmy Dores, has been for a long time. I listen to his podcast. Can be kind of an angry guy at times. And now there's a difference. I listen to Kennedy all the time, and I find myself not as interested in being angry anymore. I find myself wanting to be constructive. And, we're moving in the same direction. Jimmy's a great anti-war person. But I like, Mr. Kennedy's approach a little bit more. It just kind of elevates us, I think, in some ways. The discourse that he uses just kind of wakes us up to the idea that we could just decide to be, noble, I guess.
This is something I've seen over the past 10 years of the people who've been alerted by the same issues that everybody's facing right now. A lot of people were picking up on them earlier. And particularly during the lockdowns. And it's like, why aren't people asking questions? And the whole attitude, or, defund the police, or all these things. And the whole point is anger doesn't solve any of these problems. And it pushes you back over into that left brain, because if you're angry, then you can take action. You can punch something if you're angry enough, and you will. Or you'll scream, or you'll carry on. But you will not do it. You get very narrow-minded when you get into that mode. And, if you can not go there and instead take a step back and say, okay, what's really going on here? Reconnect, take a deep breath. Suddenly you don't go into that vibration of anger. And it is a vibration. People are sitting there vibrating if they're holding it in.
Right.
And they have to express it, or they'll end up with all sorts of problems. And so it's you staying away from the new age cultish type of things. There is a vibration involved, and it is, are you calm, or are you feeling crazed with it? Are you feeling chaotic? And the more you can feel centered, and it's like, okay, if you push me, I'll be like, remember the Weebles? I could wobble, but I'm not going to fall down. Or if somebody pushes me, am I going to fall over and my whole world falls apart? And we've been pushed toward thinking that that's what's going to happen. You open the door, you go outside, you could die from an invisible germ. And that just puts you into a really weird place, which is all this left brain thing. So, it's all, I've been looking for, like, how do I biologically explain it? But this is unlike the hippie protests and all. There was a lot of anger in that, mixed with the let's sit down and put flowers in people's guns. So it was back and forth between the two. And this one is less this overt lovey stuff as just a sense of peace. And I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you're angry, but you're still wrong. And if when you come around, I'll talk to you later, because you're not going to hear me right now. And that seems to be the way the opposition is arguing, which is kind of the way Kennedy does. He just laughs and goes, I'm not going to answer that. And humor helps. And I'd love to see the return of humor.
Yeah, he's got a great sense of humor. Him and his wife both are awesome at that. All right, I'm going to share a video again. So right, here we go, Carly. We've got the next thing coming up is a video that the campaign released on YouTube. And let's see, window, there we go. Sorry, entire screen, there we go. And then share the audio. And the polls say I can win, and this is on YouTube. Actually, I should point out a lot of our stuff that we're taking. So what we do at Discord is we collect anything that the campaign releases. We have on our Discord server. As soon as it's released, it shows up there, and so we kind of use it for our discussions and for people to share outward. But this is actually, there's a YouTube channel that the campaign maintains, and this is a video on that. And let's take a look.
We talked years before about you entering politics, and you were a bit reticent about it, but now you've sort of taken a big step. And what was it that kind of called you to this moment?
I said, well, if I run for president, it's much more difficult to censor me. Jeremy Zogby, who runs one of the biggest polling houses in America, had been polling my name across the country. And this is at a time, Mark, when, I probably had 10,000 articles written about me, and not one of them was a nice article. They were all, what a monster I was, a conspiracy theorist, and all charlatan, every name that you can apply to somebody. So I didn't expect that if I did a poll that anybody was going to, say I was a good guy. Zogby was putting my name on a bunch of polls, and he sent me an email and he said, I need to talk to you. I need to show you something. And he came to my home, and he had all these polls that he'd done across the country. And they showed, me with this extraordinary strength that showed that I actually had a pathway to win the election. And the pathway was coming from support, from all three parties, independents, Republicans, and Democrats, but very strong in each one. At that point, I took those to Cheryl, and Cheryl, she did not jump at the idea of me running, but, we talked about it for several months. I made all kinds of promises and concessions, and finally...
You're still married, so that's good. You're still married.
Well, I wouldn't have run without her support. If you like this video and you want to help me become president of the United States, go to Kennedy24.com and donate now.
I think this is... Oh.
There we go.
Okay. I think, this is the biggest question people have. They don't want to support Kennedy unless they see the path that's going to put him in the White House. And a lot of people are afraid of that, particularly with all the barriers the DNC is putting up. And, for me, it was just like, I love what he's saying, and it has to be heard. And hopefully he'll get to the White House, but I jumped in very early because I supported the fact that he is going to be heard, and what he said is they can't shut him up if he's a presidential candidate. They're certainly trying, but they're less effective at it, and they can't totally ignore him. And so from that, there's a lot of other options, but to see that from the outset, he saw the polling numbers and has had a strategy that we don't necessarily know about. That I don't have any. I think the backing's there. So go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say it's pretty obvious. I think it has been. I mean, we see it in our group. People like I've never voted for a Democrat before in my life, but I wanted to vote for this guy. I voted for Trump last time. I want to vote for this guy. The Libertarians. I mean, I'm kind of I keep contact with. And they love Mr. Kennedy. I mean, there's a lot of forces that are aligning right now for this to happen, and so there's a kind of a sense of destiny, I think, in all of this. Although that doesn't mean we don't have to work, but I think there is, and so I think what reason why we brought this forward to talk about was where this ended up taking us was in a conversation of how is this all going to play out? So we've been seeing a lot of information, and we've got a few things coming up yet about how the DNC is rigging the game and that type of thing. How is this all is this going to play out? Can the Democrat Party actually afford to let this guy go? Because they can see the same poll numbers that Zogby has. And this is honestly, I mean, I can confirm it for what we're seeing, right, with our organizing. The DNC's got to look at it and go, well, can they afford to lose, their icon, the Kennedy I mean, the Kennedys are who built this party. And, I mean, not the Clintons, and the Clintons may have diverted it or whatever, but, can they afford to lose him? And they can't. I don't think they can. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. They're so captured, though. I don't know, what kind of, I mean, it's like two welded parts trying to move in opposite directions. I don't know, what can be.
Well, they have such a hard time. There's a point of, I saw polls saying that 77% of people think that Biden is too old to run again. And with that sort of thing, I don't see how they're coming up with the poll numbers for him to elect him that they are. So we'll let that one go.
Why?
But say Biden is their candidate. They're going to be left with a choice. Do you want a candidate who could win for the Democratic Party, or do you need someone to represent whatever this new Democratic Party has turned into? And because Kennedy can win it for them, Biden, I don't think can. And
not if he's got Kennedy running
and
against
if he
him.
leaves, then he's pulling from all three parties, which will be no matter where he's being voted for, because he's standing for a vision of our life, not just, I'm this on abortion and I'm this on guns, which so many elections, that's what it's been. And so they lose either way. And the question is, are they going to shoot themselves in the foot and have the Democratic Party just go away by pushing him to be independent?
My dog's having a dream behind
Is
me.
is Tulsi Gabbard an independent now?
Yeah, I would say she's independent. I mean, she runs as independent. I think, I mean, she was, most notably associated with the Democratic Party before, she left out of, personal, concerns or moral, her high moral standards. She saw things she didn't. And then I don't think she's actually joined another party since then. But, I mean, she certainly opposes regime change wars. That's why I've always been a big fan of hers. I see her hanging around the campaign a lot, and that makes me happy. I hope to, yeah. Well, I don't want to. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Mr. Kennedy's plans are, but boy, I would be super excited to see her on that ticket. I think.
Well, she's always been a voice of reason. The times I've seen her over the past 3-4 years, and did not seem in it for the ego, which so many, some of them are, I'm powerful and you got to listen to me, and nobody can touch me sort of stuff. And the posturing that goes with that, there's a whole body language, a whole style of talking that you'll see from the ones who came through the Young Global Leaders program.
She's a serving officer in the U.S. military right now, and
she is.
It's hard for me to have a higher respect for someone than that, and to hear some of the attacks that she is.
What branch is she in?
Army. Yeah. So.
I mean, she doesn't project.
And how many terms did she serve? Honorably serve as a congresswoman in her home district in Hawaii? I mean, there's just, it goes on and on. It's, so I think she would be a great addition. I think she would bring, all those independents and libertarians and, disconnected independents, people who aren't voting. She'd bring a lot of those folks back in, and, because, I think she would show that, this is truly, a big type of ticket.
Yeah. Well, the thing I like about her is that, she's not running, hey, I'm a woman, I want to be a woman in the office. I've always, I've was one of the first women going into tech, and I never played the woman card. If people were like, well, what do you think about this? And, I could challenge them on any Star Trek thing I needed to. And then I was usually accepted into the group if I could come back with, yes, I know the secret handshake for this particular group. And, it didn't matter, what I looked like. And I was never like, oh, well, I want to get my way here. Let's throw a low-cut blouse on or stuff like that. It was always, let's get the job done. And she comes across like that of, I'm here to do my work. And the other things I am don't apply here because we're here to get the job done. Where other vice presidents right now seem to be filling demographic check boxes more than skill.
Yeah, I think Tulsi, or I mean, I think anybody in the Kennedy administration would be a much more functional member of government than anybody that we've seen before. Most of the stuff, the appointments are all performative. These people don't know what they're doing. I mean, people would get in charge of transportation. What did he know? He knew nothing about that. Bring some people in and know something. And that's where Kennedy's strengths are, is because he understands these federal agencies and how they've been captured by, and how to undo that capture just by changing a few of the key people.
And he knows people in the industries. You saw that the way he talked to the people in that at the borders video.
But he knows who the opposing forces are to if we're going to have a reasonable discussion, you need both sides to talk about it. So, to bring in the balanced conversations that we need to have so that government works well again.
Well, you need the both, but it's not just, I don't like these people. It's got to be, so what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do that's better? And I see that he's solid on, this is how we're going to do it. And I know people, and I know how to recognize the traits of the people, so I can understand who needs to go in there and not just come in and take somebody's recommendations, and then you end up with another person from a big industry.
All right. I want to kind of skip along here, though. I've got the next thing queued up is Joe Rogan's endorsement. It's a video, so you might want to mute. Let's take a look at this. And so this is a little clip that came out this week. Joe Rogan, he likes Mr. Kennedy.
What do you think of RFK Jr.?
A little quiet.
I like him personally. I've been interviewed by him. I think he's right to raise questions about the mRNAs. I don't agree with a lot of the details of what he says.
He's a fascinating guy.
You've interviewed him, right?
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to him. And what's really important is his work as an environmental attorney, what he did with the Hudson River. They cleaned up the Hudson River. So a lot of it based on him winning cases.
Yep.
And he really cares about people. He genuinely does. I think he's a good person. I really do.
Would you vote for him?
Yeah, I'd vote for him. Yeah, I would. I don't think I'm going to get the opportunity.
doesn't look that way.
I have a feeling they've got some rascally tricks up their sleeves to keep him from ever challenging. And there's not going to be any debates, that's for sure.
Yes.
Which is it's.
All right. Well, we'll stop that there. Let me hit stop the share. There we go. So yeah,
There was no hesitation with would you vote for him? Yeah, sure I would.
Yeah, it was a good endorsement. And he's getting a lot of them now too. So Aubrey and Joe, and it'll be more and more coming on board. People are just like, yeah, it makes sense, because it's like, I don't know. To me, it was like easy. It's like, how do you not?
Yeah. So anybody watching this, if you catch any endorsements, please let us know about them, because we're trying to put together a list, and at some point we'll do something fun with that information. But he's getting more and more people, and again, as he's collecting people who understand what he's talking, who've taken the 5 minutes to listen to what he actually has to say, and that they're like, okay, this makes sense to me. I like this, and so it's going to be across the board, from your neighbors to family members to famous people. So it's fun to watch this growing.
And so I got another video queued up here, so we want to mute real quick. We're going to jump to the Chris Sununu video. Governor of New Hampshire, kind of an endorsement of sorts here.
Again, there's still a lot of opportunity there to make sure you're getting good candidates, quality candidates that stand on their own, do the retail politics, engage with people one-on-one on the street, look them in the eye, ask the right questions, answer the right questions. Retail politics really does lead to good retail management. It's something that we believe very strongly in here. It's why we have such high voter turnout. So many people participate in our process, and why the candidates really have to hit the ground here.
Well, on the Democratic side of the aisle, you have President Biden and the DNC, and they're trying to make big changes to the primary calendar. They're trying to strip New Hampshire of its first-in-the-nation primary spot and give it to South Carolina. And now we're hearing Joe Biden might not be on the ballot. A lot of people don't know how this works. So what's going to happen here?
Well, yeah, Joe Biden has completely screwed this up for himself and for the Democrats. We're going first, no matter what. New Hampshire, first in the nation primary, is going to happen first. Biden tried to just give some basically political payback to his buddies in South Carolina, a state that has, frankly, one of the lower voter turnouts in the country. Then you have the Iowa Democrats that are trying to screw it up, maybe even turn their process into a primary. I'm sorry, guys. Either way, New Hampshire's primary is going to be first. That's why the Republican candidates are here. That's why you even have, Robert Kennedy here pounding the pavement on the Democrat side of things. So, once again, Joe Biden's follies have led to a big problem for the Democrat Party. Not for New Hampshire, but for the Democrat Party. Is Joe Biden's name going to be on the ballot, though? Heck if I know. Yeah. Heck if I care. I mean, really, he's completely turned his back on the state. Everybody realizes it. Yet another reason why come the general election, New Hampshire will very much be in play. People realize it's just insulting. Yeah. I mean, it really is. The president has insulted the Democrats of this state. And so I think a lot of folks realize, we're an independent-minded state, tend to be a little more Republican, and that's why there could be a very strong possibility this state goes Republican in November.
Mark the tape. He predicted New Hampshire would be first. I need a quick answer on this. You mentioned RFK Jr. He is a New Englander. New Hampshire is Massachusetts' backyard. It is their playground in many respects. Could potentially RFK Jr. win the New Hampshire primary if Joe Biden's not on the ballot? Quick answer, sir.
Absolutely. I saw him at an event with over 1,500 people at Scott Brown's Backyard Barbecue. The place was packed. There's a lot of excitement around him on the Democrat side. Biden's ignoring it, and it could be his downfall.
Wow, that would be quite the turn of events there, and something that a lot of Democrats would not be seeing coming. But we'll see if it happens.
All right. Well, kind of a sideways endorsement. Absolutely, I think he could win here. And then kind of made a comment about how the state could go red. I think if Mr. Kennedy goes as an independent or something like that, that all goes towards him too. I think that was kind of was sideways.
Well, I see it interesting as well on how his attitude toward Biden. Biden has insulted the Democrats of this state. And I don't care if he's on the ballot or not. He hasn't earned a place there, is basically what he's saying. And, being that callous about a state, the whole point is each one carries a lot of weight, and we are a union of everybody. And you can't just say, you're clicking. I can hear that.
Oh, sorry.
I'm doing that for the users. I can take it.
Oh, yeah.
But,
I didn't realize that, yeah.
But, he's insulting people. And for a governor to out and out say that about the president, I mean, this is a big insult. This is not just trivial. And this is, what we're hearing from Kennedy as well. It's like they're taking away people's votes.
So the last thing we needed right now. So this was the guy, we got to kind of look back and remember, this was the guy that we all went to the polls for. Some folks went to the polls for, and Biden went to the polls for and held their noses and voted for as the lesser of two evils. Now, the last thing that we want to see from him right now is him putting his crooked hands all over the process, changing things. I think, the thing would be simplest for him to do would be sit back and say, okay, let's have the primary. Let's have the state. I'm the president. I ran the country I can withstand an internal challenge. I mean, I did a good job. I mean, they say it every day, how well they did. So, why doesn't he just do that? I think the last thing the country wants to see is a man at the top with his hands all over something in a way that's unfair. And I think that's what, and I think the Kennedy campaign is expertly exposing that.
Yeah, Mark, I totally agree with that. Like, it's easy to look at this story and as a Kennedy supporter, be like, this is a win in a way, but it's not. Yeah. Like, ideally, the process, we would be able to trust the process. And I think that's what Kennedy would want more so than a cheap whatever they're doing to,
Yeah, who cares? I mean, really, at the end of the day, it shouldn't make that huge of a difference if South Carolina or New Hampshire. I mean, it does, and you kind of a strategic, like it'll look bad marketing wise. But I mean, in the end of the day, if he's as good as they think he is, or as they're claiming, he shouldn't have this kind of trouble. He shouldn't
allow voters to have confidence that.
Yeah. I mean, he would gain votes by just showing that confidence by being, oh yeah, I'm the president. Come at me, bro.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He's like, I'm going to hide in my basement again.
Now, it makes no sense. And, in part, when you look at this voting of anybody but, which was mainly the Biden supporters last time, it's like, well, he's not Trump. And we've got to reconsider that as a voting strategy, because the point is, who's going to do the job? It does make a difference. And it does make a difference in our daily lives when we look at how our lives have changed in 2.5 years. And that's how much damage the wrong president can make. Or, somebody who's not aligned with what's best for the people in the country.
And along those lines, so I'm just kind of transitioning here. There's no video in this one, so you're safe. A couple of the Kennedy Beacon Substack articles that came out this week that are kind of along this line, and one of them was like, who's funding the DNC? And it's interesting. The DNC, it's a corporation, and there's people obviously dumping money in, and so taking a look at who's pulling the strings might be helpful to understand why they do the things they do. And so, Carly, I don't know, you pulled these clips out. What is it that you saw that was you wanted to make a point of?
Why don't we just read this one? By now, most engaged Americans are familiar with some of the tactics that the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, they used them against Bernie Sanders in 2016, and they're using them again against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Those tactics are empowered by a diverse roster of Democratic elites whose money seems to be strategically channeled to influence the voting outcomes. Is it time to ask directly who is funding the DNC and thus deciding who's the party's nominee? I think there's more. There's more to this.
Yeah, we got about 4 slides, I think, for this one.
Yeah, there's 4. I numbered them wrong. But first off, Alex Gregorio does some of the best political cartoons.
Yeah, give him a big shout out, because we use this stuff all the time. We love using his stuff. I've not had a chance to meet him, but he's all over the place. He does a lot of great artwork for Kennedy. So,
And so the link to this article is down there. It goes into a long list of who all the different donors are. At the very top of the donor list is the Biden Victory Fund, a joint fundraising committee run as a partnership between the DNC, the Biden campaign, and the state Democratic Party offices. So the Biden campaign and the DNC are the same thing right now, which I think is totally wrong. The DNC's $9.5 million share of the pot comes courtesy of a number of mega millionaires and industry titans, including several signatories to Bill Gates and Warren Buffett's corporation Giving Pledge. Much of Silicon Valley is behind Biden's 2020 and his 2024 election fund, which itself is the largest single donor to the DNC. It's hard to imagine a system more rigged in favor of the current president. There's a whole list. They've got a whole page of other groups, but they all fall under these categories. As a brief analysis shows, the DNC is anything but fair, balanced political institution. Rather than representing the collective values and ideals of the liberal wing of the country, the DNC has sold itself out to corporate and ideological interests with enough money and influence to shape progressive values for generations to come. If American voters value their ability to choose their elected representatives and intend to do so in this 2024 election, they must first understand how and why the Democratic is manipulating the primary process.
All right. I think we got one more slide.
You want to go with that one? Or
nobody expects that every voter will agree on the same candidate. Kennedy challenged Americans to demand a fair primary process, one in which every vote counts equally, and the candidate with the most votes gets the nomination. Your vote is your power, he said, and right now the Democratic Party elites are trying to take it away from you. When we deny citizens their right to vote, and when we rig the process in favor of insiders, then the flame of democracy flickers, and one day soon it will go out. And so actually that's kind of gets back to a theme. I think, we kind of comes up a little bit because, there's the mention of the word democracy, maybe not in the Constitution, but it is the system that we use to operate our country. And if we did not use democracy, it would be all cronyism and, chaos, that kind of thing. So, I mean, it is an important part, and it needs to be fair in order for people to trust it. And if we didn't have, this just an inherent sense of fairness, then we get to a point like we're at right now where nobody trusts any of it.
Yeah, had we actually allowed the debate over, there were a large number of people who had questions about the vote in 2020. And had that debate been allowed, there would be much more faith in this next election. Right now, there's a lot of issues there of how can I even know my vote's going to count? And the things the DNC is doing, like saying, well, if you're in New Hampshire, your vote's not going to count, is not pointing the way toward one person, one vote. You had something, Rochelle?
Yeah, I was just going to say along those lines, like, it doesn't seem as if the DNC cares if people have faith in their integrity when it comes to the voting system. And I was so happy to see this article bring up what happened in 2016. They're repeating the same, pattern that largely put Trump in office in the first place. So if Trump, according to them, is like number one enemy, then what have they learned? I don't know.
Well, you get into that whole thing with number one enemy, but then they kept voting him the largest defense increases in history year after year. So, I mean, the maniac that he was, they gave him the levers of power greater than any president has ever had.
So maybe they're trying to get Trump elected again. Yeah. That's what this tells me, I guess. This is how they behave.
Okay, I have a question about the 2016. There was found corruption and unfair doings to Bernie Sanders. And I take it one person was no longer allowed to be the head of the Democratic committee or something?
Yes, so, it was Debbie Wasserman.
There was no way to give the votes back to Bernie or to do anything about the damage they did. They just slapped somebody's hand. What happened there?
Because it's always better to ask for forgiveness and permission. And that's kind of
what happened.
Work when you're a crooked corporation.
This came out in WikiLeaks. The internal emails of the DNC were leaked, and publicly they were saying, "No, we don't. We're not biased. It's in our charter. Is that what it is? Their handbook that we can't influence the primaries. We can't choose a candidate. We're just totally neutral party." But then when their emails were released, it showed clear preference for Clinton at the time. So this ended up going to court where the DNC sued, I think, Donald Trump and I don't know who else, trying to prove Russian influence in the WikiLeaks, in the leak itself. But the case was dismissed from court because it said whether or not the DNC chose a candidate is irrelevant. It's not, because the DNC is a private corporation. They're allowed to kind of like, they don't have to follow their rules. The rules of the DNC is like an employee handbook. They can't be like, it can't be taken to court if they break their own rules, I guess.
Okay, that helps understand it and why there was nothing done about it. And so since then, they're like, okay, we're corrupt, and that's fine. Is that what they're saying?
Well, their lawyer did come out and say, basically, like, the DNC has the right to sit in a back, I forget the exact quote, I wish I had it, but to have like backroom negotiations and smoke cigars and pick your party leader. And they have the right. That's what happened. He said that's not what happened, but
yeah, I don't know about the cigar part, but I think what they did is they argued on their own behalf as a private corporation that they have the ability to influence their own matters, that kind of thing. And it is kind of underhanded and crooked, but I think there's an expectation. I know that from the Democrats that I've known who labored away inside their party, there is an expectation of fairness. So I think, if that's taken away somewhere, I think that's unfair to them. And
well, that's where, again, transparency helps.
Yeah, there's very little of that when it comes to,
And, when you look at the entire course of it, no, we're wonderful, we're unbiased. And then when they get caught, they said, oh, look, Trump and the Russians did it. We're down to like sixth graders. No, I didn't do it. He did it.
Low resonance stuff again. That's where
and
we're back
then
to.
It's like, well, now that you guys know, we've been doing it all along, so you don't need to worry about yourself. And I'm just not liking this entire drama as it plays out. And this is, why we need the security, why we need this stuff. This is a really good article.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start to share, but then I'm gonna end it because I got to reshare it with the sound so we can see the clip. But this is kind of the next thing up. We all heard about the event at it was an event, speaking event in California, where an armed man approached the area where Mr. Kennedy was going to be speaking. He was detained first by Mr. Kennedy's security and then later arrested by local police. And so there was some additional details that came out. And this is Gavin D. Becker, who is head of Mr. Kennedy's security, also runs a world famous security detail. And so I'm going to stop the share and then restart it so that we can do it with sound. Fair warning, Carly. Entire screen. There we go. Oh, wait a minute. No, I didn't share the sound. Sorry. Gotta do it again. So many buttons to press. Entire screen. Turn the sound button on. There we go. Let's give this a listen.
I'm Gavin D. Becker. You can obviously learn more about me from Wikipedia or any other online source, but I want to give you a very quick introduction. I advise governments and at-risk individuals on anti-assassination strategies. I'm a 3-time presidential appointee. I served 2 terms on the President's Advisory Board at Department of Justice. I designed mosaic systems, threat assessment systems that are used to screen threats to justices of the Supreme Court and members of Congress. I developed threat assessment systems used by the U.S. Marshals Service and by state police agencies protecting governors in 12 states. My best-selling books on preventing violence are now published in 21 languages. You get the idea. My company provides protection services for many at-risk public figures, including for my dear friend and now presidential candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's odd that we're protecting him because since 1968, presidential candidates get Secret Service protection. That started immediately after Senator Robert Kennedy, Bobby's father, was assassinated at a campaign event. Immediately, Secret Service began protecting candidates, and by Election Day that year, 12 candidates were getting protection. But the Biden administration has refused to afford Secret Service protection to Bobby Kennedy Jr. Now, an important note here, the Secret Service itself has been helpful and professional, and I have no complaint with them. They stand ready to provide the protection, but the Biden administration says no. Now, what's happened during the long months that the administration has failed to protect this candidate is super alarming, and I'm going to share just a couple of incidents that have already been public. A few weeks ago, a mentally ill intruder entered Bobby's home demanding to see the candidate, and he was arrested. It wasn't the first time that same man had been arrested for Kennedy-related intrusions. More significantly, last week, a man showed up outside a campaign event where Bobby was going to speak. And protectors from my company were observing him, and they were ready when the man went to a side entrance, identified himself as federal law enforcement, and ordered our protectors with intensity, "Take me to Kennedy immediately. I have to see him right now." When protectors saw that this man was carrying a handgun, they removed him from the area, isolated him, surrounded him, LAPD was called, and we handed over custody when the police arrived, and the man was arrested. In his backpack, which we screened for explosives, were more handguns, knives, and extra ammunition. A second man who'd driven him to the campaign event was also taken into custody by police. Obviously, the incident is very, very alarming. We now know that he's a strident QAnon follower, and to help us guess what he was planning, we reviewed everything we could find online and began quite an investigation. There's a TikTok video that he posted just weeks ago trying out that special new outfit that he was wearing when he made the approach at Bobby's speech with the handgun and had a fake federal badge. At one point in the video, he calls himself God's gangster. Referring to his readiness, he says, "Shit, I got it all." Now, on this video, he spells out his name super carefully, letter by letter, and he says, "You'll know who you're fucking with." Near the end of the video, he says, "Take care of each other," and then adds his most chilling words, "if I don't make it back." Now, the risk in this incident doesn't take an expert, it's obvious. And despite knowing everything that I've shared with you and knowing much more alarming material that's contained in a detailed 67-page threat assessment the government received, the administration still hasn't responded to the campaign's second formal request for protection. What are they waiting for? So with all that background, I'm reaching out to you today in what is probably the most unusual fundraising request ever in presidential politics. It's because they've refused to provide Secret Service protection that 30 cents of every dollar donated to RFK Jr.'s campaign has to go to security. Normally, none of it would. I would gladly pay for it all myself. He's my dear friend, and I'd like him to win. But it's not allowed. It would be considered a campaign contribution above the limit, and I've already made my campaign contribution. But you can help. You can help to continue the best level of security that we can accomplish for my dear friend through donating to his campaign. It is crazy that we have to ask the public to provide protection, but that's where we are.
So that's, and I mean, it's a great piece. I think Gavin, quite a speaker. And then very necessary. So the reason why we got this, we've got a few things kind of coming up here toward the end of the broadcast. We want to talk about, we're reaching the end of the month. And so here we are at the 23rd. We've got just about a week. What is it? How many days? 31?
It's 30 days in September.
All right. Yeah. 30 days has September. I should have remembered that. Anyway, so we got a week left. And so this is a quarterly deadline. And so what's really important for the campaign, not only is the expenses that they have, because they got several things going on. They got the added expense of security with they want to roll out field offices. They're right now they're in a place they want to put people in every state in the country, 50 field offices, and so they've got and then they've got the end of the month thing coming up where it's important to be able to report, say, hey, Kennedy's got some support, because people will start paying attention to that. Because the one thing we can't get, or they can't get through, is the bubble, right? The reason. And if people say, hey, they made $20 million or whatever their goals are, that's important, because then people say, well, there's got to be something to it. And so if you haven't made a contribution, I think today or this week would be a great way to do it. Go to Kennedy24.com, and you can make a contribution without creating an account, but I would strongly urge you to make an account, Kennedy24.com, and you can create a link from that you can share on your Facebook page and other places to for other people to donate and to join the campaign. I think let's hop right into the next one.
Okay, the donations don't have to be huge. He's asking for as low as like $5, but this all adds up when you get it from 100 people and suddenly you got $500. So just whatever you can is important to help him, and particularly in opening the state offices. Looks like we're not going to get feedback from our Michigan office and Indiana people at the farm thing. I think it didn't start till a little bit later. Yeah. But these type of things of being able to coordinate state events and to attend things is going to become more and more important. So go ahead.
Yeah. So the next thing up, I'm gonna this will have a video, so you're gonna need to mute. The next thing up that we saw this week, and we're kind of pounding through these last three items because they're somewhat related or fairly related, is the Join the Grassroots Finance Committee. Campaigns relying on corporate interests usually to do their fundraising. What Mr. Kennedy wants to do differently is, rely on us. And so they put out a great video about grassroots fundraising, and let's give that a look.
Hey everybody, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here. Typical candidates rely on big corporate donors and millionaires to fund their campaigns. And in return, the candidates advance the agenda of those donors. That's how we got a government that sympathizes more with corporate interests than with the needs of everyday Americans. As president, I promised to help end the corrupt merger of state and corporate power. But to do that, we have to start by funding our campaign in a different way. That's why I'm proud to announce the Grassroots Finance Committee, GFC. This is a people-powered volunteer movement to fund my campaign for President of the United States. But I need your help. I'm asking my supporters to join the Grassroots Finance Committee by giving or raising $1,000 from your community. Each committee member will get a personalized donation link on Kennedy24.com. You can ask your friends or family to donate $5 or $10 or $25 through your link to help reach your goal. You can get creative by teaching a class and asking for a suggested donation, by doing a hike and charging people, $5 a mile. You could host a meetup of other supporters for a suggested donation. This effort is about raising the funds we need to open field offices in every state so that we can spread our message with voters all across the country and build our community. The effort is also about increasing capacity and expanding community. Designed into this program is a way to connect with other supporters in your region so that we can build this campaign from the ground up. Check out Kennedy24.com/GFC to join today. We are relying on a truly grassroots fundraising model because I don't want the corporations to decide who the next president is going to be. I want you to decide, and we need your help.
One thing that I found interesting was, there's limits on how much any given individual can give to a specific candidate. It's $3,300 during the primary cycle and $6,600, another $3,300 for after the primaries.
Right.
But then I was seeing in that article about the contributors to the Democratic Party, and it's all these billionaires and all these companies giving money, and they don't have those limits. So what's going on there? Does anybody know that?
So that's donations to political action committees, and that's dark money that you hear about. So there's a lot of that going on, and it's very obscured. And so right now, the party that uses that, or the group that uses that the most, is the Democratic Party. They use more dark PAC money than anyone else, and that's what we're up against. That's what Mr. Kennedy's up against in his campaign. They just have, because they have, they're billionaires. Everybody knows the names of the billionaires that support them, and their, the ideas that the agendas that those billionaires want, and so they can pour in just about as much money as they want. And so, in a kind of a high level sense, what a PAC is, a political action committee, and there's several of them. They all have different charters, and it gets a little complicated. But essentially, they're allowed to just have an opinion with their money in a political race. Like, they can run ads on behalf of someone, but they can't actually coordinate with the campaign to do it, because that would be contributing directly. And so that's why they're able to do it. They can just kind of jump into the political space and say, we're the Good People Action Fund, and we like this guy a lot, and this is why we like him. And as long as they don't talk to the campaign or ask the campaign like what they want, they can do that all day long. Anybody can. And so that's kind of the basic of it. Do we want that in our political process? Unnamed people who have that much power?
This came out of Citizens United, correct?
Yes.
The ability for corporations to.
Will you explain that, Michelle?
It was. Do you remember protests that corporations are not people?
Yeah.
So that's the Citizens United decision, and I'm not entirely clear. I know it's like 2010, I believe.
That's a decision that allowed some money to start, corporate monies to start flowing into these dark. But I don't know. I don't know what the decision is, because at the end of the day, people with money actually have a right to have their voices heard too. I mean, if I had a yard, like I had a fence around my yard and I was allowed to paint on it whatever I wanted to, I would. Like I like Kennedy. If I could paint that on my, I would. So these guys just have a bigger sign, and they're able to use it. So we got to kind of, it's going to take a little bit of, I think, it's not all or nothing. I think this isn't going to be one of those decisions, but certainly it's not helping us a lot right now, I don't think. Being up against that is hard.
but individual contributions do make a difference.
All the difference.
And this is another way of making sure that your voice is heard, because as you hear, 30% of the money is going to security, and travel expenses of a small group of people, all the places Kennedy is going to contact people and to talk to them and hear what they need and what they want. And then you've got, the other part of opening the state offices. He's mentioned that in multiple videos. They need to get the state offices opened, and we're like a central. Our Discord server is a central place where volunteers can be here, and different states can talk to each other. I love this idea of the Michigan state and Indiana going together and just caravanning. Let's stop by Johnny's house, and then we'll drive into Indy and go do an event. And that way you get more people showing up to your events of the real active volunteers. But having a state office allows some money to go to that, so it's not all at the expense of the volunteers. So these things are really important, and it's the first step of getting your voice heard.
So I've got one more video we're going to share, the last one of our set chat. It's going to be a video, so here we go. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't do the audio. Scene, one more. Entire screen, turn on video. Oh, so many steps involved in this. Share. There we go.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Let's be honest, big corporations now own Washington, D.C., and increasingly they control and monetize every aspect of our lives. I'm running for president because I want to take back their power and put it back where it belongs, in your hands. Now, when you say that you're going to return power to the people, and you actually mean it, some very powerful forces get scared, and then they get angry. That explains the corporate media's outrage against me. But let's be clear, what they're really frightened of is you. They're terrified of the idea that Americans will be back in charge of their country. My opponents have Wall Street, they have big tech, big pharma, big ag, and the defense contractors. But I've got something that's potentially much more powerful than all those vested interests. I have you. We're never going to match the billions that they get from corporate contributors, but with millions of small donations, we're mounting a campaign that has them running scared. And I need you to keep going. So today, I'm breaking with fundraising conventional wisdom. Most campaigns don't share their fundraising goals publicly because they don't want to be embarrassed. But we're not like most campaigns. We are your campaign. We want to raise $5 million before midnight, September 30th, to fund our ground operations across the country. That may sound like a lot, but I'm confident that we can get it done. Please consider giving today. Give $5 or $50 or $500 if you can afford it. And if you can't, and volunteer and help us expand our army across 50 states. Thank you for stepping up. Let's take back our country, and God bless America.
I love the fact that, he's out in nature. He's not just talking off of a teleprompter in a room all the time. And, I just love listening to him talk here.
Well, I think, the message is let's get out there and drop some money in the bucket for Mr. Kennedy. I mean, there's a lot of folks out there that support him. I mean, if everyone were just $5, $10, $20 a piece, it really would make the goal. I know I dropped mine in, and I'm wearing all my Kennedy gear. You can buy gear. That's another way to donate. You can go to the website and buy a T-shirt or buy a hat, and then, the proceeds go beyond it. Or you can just drop a few dollars in there. That's a good way to donate. We're at the end of our set chat. Carly, do you have any other comments, or Rochelle?
Oh,
or
just
Vlad?
In talking about the gear, we've got a lot of stuff that you can use to print your own T-shirt. Iron on things. Print them in your printer. Self embroider on your hats, or different ways that you can do the merchandise. whether you buy it through the campaign, which is a contribution, or whether you make your own, every time you wear something with the name on there, people have been surprised at the number of smiles you're getting from other people. The people, thumbs up from people when you walk by, and you're like, oh, what? Oh, I'm wearing the shirt. But there's something that's a positive connection. People smile when they see you got it on, and it's another way. There's a lot of third-party people selling. That money does not go to the campaign, but wearing this, a lot of this grassroots stuff, I cannot say how important it is to just, be heard on whatever scale you communicate on, and be seen. And that's how we turn the tide on this. And, I just really like the idea of living in a more sane world.
Me too. All right.
I wanted to say too, right now there's a call for happy hour events. So
Oh yeah, we got to mention that. We forgot.
yeah, I would just say, like, in general, if you don't feel like hosting something, at least check into Kennedy24.com. Look under events and look up your zip code to see if anybody's hosting in your area.
Yeah.
And that ties into the idea of, organizing an event where people can all make contributions at the same time, or you can raise the money and do the contribution. But that goes against your total. So if you think you might come up near one of those totals, but just any way you can get money to the campaign, or to just get together with other people. The happy hour thing, I think, is a great idea, because that's a very simple thing to do. Of, hey, we're going to meet out in the park. I think Johnny's setting up one of, we'll meet in the park Sunday afternoon at 3, and it's just, be there. You have something that says Kennedy on it, so people know where you are, and you can just talk to people. And it's a real easy one to do, and not a lot of high-end organizing that takes place, and you might actually have fun with it.
Yeah, I've organized every time the campaign's coming out with an idea for an event. I've organized one. It's been a great experience. The people are awesome. I mean, they come out, they're very friendly. They're not political kind of people. They're just normal, everyday people. And it's usually a lot of fun to get to know them. I'm looking forward to getting to know more Kennedy people in Minnesota, where I'm from. So,
and most of the people are saying, I've never been involved in politics before, but I feel it's now time that I've got to do something, and for this candidate. And it's on this, we've got a video that's going to run about 25 minutes. And at the bottom of it, we have the donation link for Kennedy24.com. And also, please join us at our Discord server. We've got a lot of information. Everything we can find about Kennedy comes in feeds. And we have a lot of just brilliant discussions. We have our fitness challenge, where Vlad is our leader in that one. And Mark's participating in that often, and several others. And we're just having fun. And remember what it was like to hang out with other people before 2020, and people had fun and did things. And we want to bring that world back. So see us on Discord. And if nothing else, enjoy the video.
All right.
Khrushchev, he said, the earth is an ark, and we can't build another one. We need to preserve it. And the question now is, are we willing to do anything like that today? Or are we going to remain stuck in a self-righteous story in which America is categorically good and our opponents are irredeemably evil? That's the example we've set for everybody in the world. No wonder it's been replicated everywhere, between Israel and Iran, between India and Pakistan, between Shia and Sunni, between Jew and Arab, between Hindu and Muslim, left and right, between pro-life and pro-choice, between facts and anti-facts. This tribalistic, us versus them thinking is tearing us apart. Peace comes from a different place. It starts by seeing within others and within ourselves that which is not selfish, but is brave and generous and idealistic and has good intentions. And I'm not saying that we should ignore the base elements of human nature or the dangers of the world. But if that's all that we see, and we're going to be stuck forever in the mentality of war, and that's where the military-industrial complex wants to keep us. To chart a course for the future of our nation's military and foreign policy, I'll return once again to the words of John F. Kennedy. Too many of us think that peace is impossible.
Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable.
When we take the first step toward peace, we will become once again a true world leader, a moral authority. It doesn't take much, it's just the first step. And people will start looking at America differently, the way they did when my uncle was president. Thank you all very much.
I think a lot of people are confused about why we're not trying to negotiate a settlement, why we're not trying to force peace talks, why that isn't something that we're requiring along with all of these donations and all of the funding and the weaponry. But I think, it's pretty clear to a lot of people that we may not want peace talks.
There's people making a lot of money on this.
That's right.
We committed now 140 billion. If Biden gets the extra 24 billion that he's looking for. But in March we upped it to 113 billion. Well, the entire budget of EPA is 12 billion. So that's all we've got for the environment in this country. But we have 10 times that for Ukraine. And, we're having crisis here.
Yeah, we have millions of people in the U.S. that can't eat, that don't have enough.
That have a lot of problems.
35% of Americans
those resources
are not making enough to pay for basic human needs. And those people are on the edge of becoming homeless. And it's a crisis. The entire budget for CDC is $12 billion. But we got 10 times that again. When Mitch McConnell was asked in March, why are we in the Ukraine? Why do we have enough money for this? Where's the money coming from? He said, don't worry about it, because that money's not really going to Ukraine. It's going to U.S. military contractors, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, Lockheed. And, so he admitted it's just a big money laundering scheme to the military-industrial complex. And then if you look, who do you think actually owns all of those companies?
State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock.
Exactly.
Yes.
So now you see
it all goes back to that.
Yeah, they're just strip mining the wealth from the American middle class and shifting it upward through all of these different mechanisms that they're literally control everything.
So, and no one's talking about this, which is interesting. The Republicans aren't talking about it. The Democrats aren't talking about it. You're the only candidate out there kind of bringing up these issues in this way.
You made a comment after Wednesday's presidential debate on the GOP side that the candidates are out of sync with the public. And I think you referenced Oliver Anthony's song, Richmond, North of Richmond.
Richmond, north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just want to have total control.
He really frames this as a class war. The working poor are being systematically strip mined of their wealth by what he calls rich men north of Richmond. In other words, the Congress that essentially functions as indentured servants to the big corporations. Anthony has talked about, how we've got to put aside the culture war, because that's kind of an orchestrated dispute, that keeps blacks and whites fighting each other. It's a distraction from the real culprits of this, which is BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, these huge corporations that now own 88% of the S&P 500. And they're now trying to buy every single family home in America. And if they stay on the current trajectory, they will own 60% of the single family homes by 2030. Almost everybody I know has a story of a friend or their own story of going to buy a home, about to make an offer on it, or maybe they made an offer on it, and then somebody swoops in with a cash offer and takes it off the table, steals it out from under them. And when you look at who that is, it's usually an LLC with some ambiguous name. But if you trace it to actually who owns it, it's BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. So these companies are buying our land base, they're buying up the farms in this country. Today, the average wage for an American is $5,000 less than the cost of basic human needs of food, transportation, and housing. And so credit card debt has gone up. And who owns virtually all of those banks and credit card companies? BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. So the whole thing is rigged to strip mine wealth from the American public. And these Republicans who are debating this week, they're like 40 years behind. They have all these platitudes from the Reagan administration. We're going to be tough on crime, tough on China, tough on Russia, tough on women who, want bodily autonomy, tough on the environment. But none of them talked about what's happening to Americans who just can't pay their bills anymore. If you like this video and you want to help me become president of the United States, go to Kennedy24.com and donate now.
Hello, my name is Madhav Vassetti. I have been a physician for 25 years. I've trained at some of the best institutions in this country. And this is an appeal to all my colleagues in medicine to consider voting for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in 2024. Many of us have been very quick to label him a so-called anti-vaxxer. He isn't. His mission has been the same as ours, to make sure that all medical interventions, including vaccines, have met the highest standards for safety. Bobby believes that our regulatory agencies have failed us in this regard, and he is asking us to show him where he has gotten it wrong. I tried to, and I couldn't. His position on vaccines is unpopular in our community. It is this sentiment that is being leveraged by media and others to justify the censorship of his position on all matters. Censorship should be anathema to every member of a free society, and especially to those of us in the scientific community. I urge you to please hear him out before passing judgment. Thank
you. A loud report that I recognized as coming from a high-powered rifle, and I immediately looked over my shoulder to the right where the sound had come from, and I couldn't see anything right away. And I turned quickly and looked at the president, and President Kennedy was kind of leaning a little bit to his left towards Mrs. Kennedy.
One of the last remaining witnesses of the JFK assassination says he is rethinking the entire incident that was going on for the first time. Former Secret Service agent who was protecting Kennedy that day told the New York Times that, quote, "I'm beginning to doubt myself. Now I begin to wonder about what really happened." Now, of course, this comes as JFK's nephew, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is now seeking the Democratic nomination for the presidency, but the so-called Democrats are not acting very democratic. So if RFK Jr. feels like he is not getting a fair shake from the Democrats, will he run third party? He joins us now with more. Let me first ask you about the Secret Service agent. The guy's name is Paul Landis. He talked about the magic bullet. Magic bullet to me was absurd from day one. To me, it never had any credibility. He was there, even put himself on record at the time, and mentioned that he made a mistake in his placement of the bullet in that room where your uncle was after he was shot. My question to you is, should this now open a full-fledged investigation?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this development is not really his revelation, because this information has been out there, and the information, the overwhelming information that there was more than one shooter involved and that there were multiple people involved has been recognized by the American people. 70% of Americans don't believe the Warren report, but more importantly, when Congress reinvestigated the Warren Commission evidence and was looking at much more evidence in 1979, the House Select Assassinations Committee, they came to the conclusion, and this was the official conclusion of the report, that John Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. Majority of that House staff believe that it was the CIA behind that conspiracy. The important thing that's happened now is finally the New York Times, the orthodoxy is starting to crumble. The New York Times, which has been the major bastion, the champion of the Warren Committee report long after it was discredited by a million different sources. The other thing that's important now, Sean, is, I think that they ought to have a real investigation of what happened, a genuine investigation. But that looks at all the evidence, the millions of pages of documents that are now available. But more importantly, the last 5,000 pages of documents that the CIA will not release. It's breaking the law now. They're supposed to release those documents by 2017. President Trump promised to release them, which was his duty, and then he didn't. We don't know why. President Biden promised to release them, and then he didn't. We don't know why. Among those documents, the most interesting things that people want to know about is Bill Harvey's, the Miami station chief, who almost certainly was directly involved in the assassination, his travel records on that day. And I think most of the scholars who are looking at this issue, that is the principal piece of interest that they want to know about, that we believe that the CIA is.
A security problem at a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. event tonight. An armed man impersonating a U.S. Marshal showed up at this event at the Wilshire Ebell Theater. Kennedy's security noticed something suspicious about him and detained him before they called police. The man was arrested. Kennedy says he was wearing 2 shoulder holsters with loaded pistols and had spare ammunition magazines. The FBI has been notified. Kennedy is running for president.
We were in a great discussion about the Ukraine war because we spent $8 trillion on wars. We've spent all of these interventions that we had after 9/11, where all of the architects of them, these neoconservatives, after that, they were shut out of government, right? They kind of left, they were disgraced. And now they're popping up again. They're popping up again as Democrats, and they're the main, a lot of them are some of the main promoters of the idea of this endless war in the Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things my uncle figured out when he, 4 months into his administration, he had been warned by Eisenhower about the emergence of the military-industrial complex, which would turn America into an imperial state abroad and a surveillance state, a garrison state, a security state at home. And, Eisenhower had said the thing that our founding fathers had said: you cannot maintain democracy if you're an imperial state abroad. You're going to, you'll bankrupt the middle class. You'll turn us into a surveillance state. My uncle, 4 months in, recognized that, when he was lied to by the CIA, by Alan Dulles, Charles Cabell, Richard Bissell, and by the military brass about the Bay of Pigs. And when the men were dying on the beach, he took public blame for it. But he privately told his aides, I want to take the CIA, shatter it into 1,000 pieces, and scatter it to the winds. And then he fired Alan Dulles, Richard Bissell, and Charles Cabell, the guys who were directly responsible for lying to him. But for the next 1,000 days of his administration, he was in a pitched battle to keep our country out of war. They wanted the wars because he recognized that their job had devolved into providing the military-industrial complex, military contractors, a constant pipeline of new wars to feed their profits. Well, in, the neocons, which are neoconservatives for people who don't know. It's a movement that started in the early 1990s, around 92, when the Berlin Wall came down, and they published a document that called the Project for New American Century that said that because we were the victor in the Cold War, that America now had the right to rule the world for a century or more by using its superior military powers, the unipower. So after 2001, we spent, between then and now, we spent $8 trillion on wars, on regime change wars. It was the Iraq War and then all these spillover wars in Yemen, Libya, Syria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, et cetera. What did we get for those wars? Here's what we got. Iraq is now worse off than we found it. It's an incoherent kind of battle between Shia and Sunni death squads. We killed more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein. We killed between 650,000 and 1 million Iraqis. We have pushed Iraq into a proxy posture with Iran, which is exactly the foreign policy outcome we've been trying to avoid for decades. In the spillover war in Syria, we created ISIS. We sent 2 million refugees into Europe and destabilized every democracy in Europe. We created Brexit.
Right.
The riots that are now happening in France are a direct result of those wars. And we bankrupted the American middle class because we didn't have the money to pay for them. So, and that is, what we got. Well, that's one of the things they're talking about. The DNC does not want me in the primary. They, they have the candidate that they want, who is President Biden. They don't want him to debate. They don't want him to do retail politics. They don't want him to have unscripted conversations with voters, and they definitely don't want him to debate me. And so they look at me, I feel, although I haven't spoken to them directly, I've written them, but have not gotten reply, as a colossal nuisance. And they're doing everything they can to fix the results. So one of the things they've done is they've made it so that any vote that I get in Iowa or New Hampshire will count for Biden. And they're trying to do the same thing now in Georgia. How
are they doing that?
Well, they're passing a rule that if any candidate who steps into the state of New Hampshire or Iowa to campaign will lose all their delegates. And so I've campaigned in both states, so I will lose their delegates. But now what they're trying to do is we're going to know on September 14th whether they actually do it, is they're trying to pass another rule that if you step foot in New Hampshire or Iowa, that any vote you get in Georgia, which is a big delegate state, will also count for the president and not for, so they're basically disenfranchising everybody in those states. So there's no campaign. And they're talking about this idea of making myself and Marianne Williamson, who's the other Democratic candidate, to pay for all the primaries ourselves.
Are you enjoying this process, Cheryl, of running for president? And just,
well, after that, doesn't that sound fun?
I mean, it sounds fun. I mean, is this fun for you? You're an accomplished actress and comedian. Is this fun going all over the place and meeting people? I'm sure it has its challenges, but is it enjoyable at all?
Well, it's interesting because I did not think that it would be fun.
Of course.
Just being honest. It's
of
not
course.
my vibe. I don't like crowds. I don't
Yeah.
I don't but
And she doesn't like hostile,
Of course.
She's a comedian.
Right.
Well, yeah.
It makes
yeah.
people happy. It makes people laugh.
Yeah. But it was interesting because I met Bobby in South Carolina, and I thought I would just, sit in the hotel room and wait till he got home.
Yeah.
But then I went out with him everywhere, and it was so interesting because I don't know when in my life I would be going to like small communities in
Right.
South Carolina and just meeting people, just listening to people. And it's very sweet,
Yeah.
actually, and it's very eye-opening, you know,
Yeah.
because a lot of people live in your space, your
Right.
town, your city, wherever, and so you get wrapped up in what's going on in your city, and what's going on in Los Angeles is not necessarily a reflection of what's going on in
Right.
Middle America. So
Right.
it's so really interesting to sit down and talk to people and hear what they're going through and what their struggles are and what their hopes are. It's a really sort of magical way to see
Connect
America.
with people.